Freeze!
What was that?
Freeze! Nope, let's get out of here.
Hi, what's up? It's Titas. This build is a nice chill build for a more casual playthrough. The debuffing that we do with this build is insane. We slow and freeze everything left and right, from fodder to bosses. The bosses are slowed so much they almost come to a complete halt. They don't, however, completely freeze, but we can at least slow bosses down for quite a bit. The damage for bosses is not there with this build, that's why I recommend a more casual playthrough. It just can't compete with some other builds in terms of damage output. It is, however, unparalleled in AoE impairment, aka crowd control on the mobs. If you find a build that is comparable in debuffing enemies, let me know. Cold explosions carry this build, so it doesn't care for damage that much. Everything is geared towards ailments, so that we get to 17 chilled immediately to start freezing. The build uses cold spells and relies on frost explosions and freeze to overcome all enemies. It can easily deal with mobs, but bosses turn into a slugfest. The build is a very special one, because on the one hand it is maxed out on the cooldown rate. The build's main spell, Frost Nova, has a cooldown that we want to reduce. Our blink spells, dodge and barrier also have a cooldown that gets reduced a lot. That means we can spam all the spells. On the other hand, the build is geared towards cold damage and its ailment chilled. The special effect freeze is a good way to incapacitate enemies. Bosses get slowed down so much that they sometimes move like in slow motion. The freezer build is a Stormblade, which is a combination of Storm and Rogue. The main mastery is Storm with our cold spells, and Rogue serves as a support mastery to increase the maximum chilled stacks and ailment bonuses. The ailment type chilled has been declared by me as the weakest, which might be true in terms of damage, but it is very strong as a crowd control when we use the freeze effect. It is extremely safe and you breeze through the game without much difficulty. Only bosses are a handful because we lack damage. The ailment chilled is a half damaging ailment type, meaning it only deals half damage, whereas other types such as plagued deal full damage. We get a good slow to make up for it. This slow even affects bosses to a high degree. The whole build started with the shield moon discs. The unique stat gives a big 20% more cooldown rate to area spells. Our main spell, Frost Nova, is an area spell, and reducing its cooldown is very powerful. We got all the ailment bonuses for more ailment stacks, more ailment chance and power. The build uses blinks and dodges to quickly get into groups of enemies, then curse them with Frostbite. We create Cyclone and use Frost Nova. We got such a high ailment chance for our spell attacks that it is enough to cast a Cyclone on a group of enemies to freeze them all. Frostbite has frost explosions, meaning if you cast it on a frozen enemy, they explode. This build lets frost explosions happen all the time, but only against mobs, because it is not possible to freeze bosses. Enemy leaders can be frozen too, but they have a higher resistance than regular mobs. We have so many items that reduce the cooldown rate, so the build can dodge around constantly, use barrier all the time and freeze or slow everything in sight. Let's go over the pros and cons. This is the most mobile build in the game. We got all the good dodges, blinks and flickers in the world, and on top of that we maxed out our cooldown rate. You can evade enemy attacks and quickly go in and out of fights. The build is safe and fun, because I love freezing enemies. In Titan Quest 1, one of my favorite builds was geared around freezing enemies. That game had a better effect when smashing frozen enemies. I am not a fan of how it's handled in TQ2, when frozen enemies crumble into dust. It is much cooler to smash the ice cubes. That probably will stay that way, because the frost explosions give the game lag spikes, especially with a screen full of enemies. The downside of this build is the boss performance. Bosses take really long, and this is why I wouldn't recommend that character as a farming hero, more like a build for a casual run. Managing dodges and all the active spells can be quite a handful, so it's not a beginner friendly build at all. You won't see more micromanagement in Titan Quest than with this build. Then let me show you the build's features in form of abilities, attributes and items. Starting with our main spell, Frost Nova. This spell shoots ice spikes in a radius around the player, dealing cold damage. We use Vulnerable, which makes hit enemies take 20% more damage from all sources. Max out cooldown charge, of course. There is no need to skill Enhanced Ailment. We get so many other ailment bonuses later on that we are immediately at 17 shield stacks on every enemy when we use our combo. Max out Frost Explosion. This increases the spell's damage and also damages surrounding enemies. Cyclone is another part of the combo. Use it to cast a blizzard that freezes enemies and brings them immediately to 17 shield stacks. Max out Blizzard for more cold damage. Personal Storm, because we blink around a lot, it's good to have another blizzard surrounding you. 2 out of 3 in Escalate to boost the cold damage the longer the blizzard lasts. Our third spell is Frostbite. This spell curses enemies in a small area so that they get some damage over time debuff and is slow. Go for 2 points in Frost Explosion. This means that if we curse an enemy with Frostbite and that enemy gets frozen, it explodes for frost damage. Cold Snap consumes freeze to cause another bigger cold explosion. In layman's terms, this combination of modifiers basically lets cold explosions trigger 2 times when a cursed enemy gets frozen. This deals a ton of damage to groups of enemies. Max out Acceleration to deal more damage over time. Use Blink to teleport into enemies. Curse them, Cyclone them and Frost Nova them. This is the build's basic combo and it's very powerful. Only max out Repeat on your blink. Flicker is used when you are out of blinks. Max out cooldown charge. The dodge also needs some love. Max out cooldown charge and also skill distance and teleport to quickly get into the midst of mobs. So this is how our combo works. We see a mob of monsters, we blink into them, cast Cyclone, then cast Frostbite and finish with a Frost Nova. It's an easy combination that completely obliterates all kinds of mobs. Let's continue with the skills. Another active spell is Vanish. We max out ailments to get some nice ailment chance. We don't really need that, but the 40% ailment power. Also skill Deadly Strike and Enhanced Duration for some extra damage. Chilled as an ailment type needs all the ailment power buffs in the world, because it is very weak by itself. It's a half damaging ailment because of the slow effect. Vanish is a spell with a cooldown, so it benefits a lot from our maxed out cooldown rate bonuses. Vanish is also okay to kill bosses a little faster. It is still super slow though. Let's take a look at the auras. Preparation with maxed ailment bonus and Storm Nimbus with a maxed out Storm Enhancement and 2 points in Conservation. Looking at the passives, we start of course with Arcane Influx and the energy regen feats. Raging Mind is good. Almost all of our damage comes from spell sources, and we skill cast speed and ailment chance. 11 points in Storm Attunement just because only the 1 feat spell damage is relevant for us. The most important passive for this build is of course Deep Freeze, all the way at tier 4. You want to unlock that as soon as possible, so max out Storm Mastery's Divinity first. Chill amount and chill duration is the way to go here. Storm Protection at level 2 is also cute, just for the movement spell cooldown rate, which further reduces the cooldown of our dodge, blink and flicker. Rogue Mastery is awesome here, because with it we can go for all the ailment bonuses and increase the maximum ailment stacks a little. Go for Deft Hands, just enough to skill the ailment feat. Deadly Affliction is a very good one, skill ailment power and ailment amount. We need the amount very badly, because the higher the chill stacks, the higher the chance of enemies becoming frozen. Ailment power is also necessary, the build lacks in damage against bosses, so we are in dire need for more ailment power. Shadow Arts is also a good one. Max it and go for cast speed and spell ailment chance. Torment, all the way at tier 4, is also very strong. Max it and skill ailment amount and damage over time. The latter increases the chill damage but also the cold damage over time from Frostbite. We also skill Nimble Defense, just for the movement skill cooldown rate, so that we can spam the teleports indefinitely. I had some leftover passive points and dumped them in accuracy. I went for high critical hit chance, that one is not so bad here. Our barrier also needs just 2 points in guard and fast barrier. The barrier doesn't last long, but is available all the time due to the cooldown rate bonuses that we have. I also put 1 point in the primary attack and went for Frost Explosion. This converts our damage of our primary attack to cold damage. I'll tell you why in a minute when we look at the items. Let's take a look at the attribute and items. These topics go together because the attribute distribution heavily influences which kind of items we can carry because of the item requirements. I decided to go for Might Armor because those give good resistances and also have very high armor values, which helps for survivability. I put a lot of points in Might and Summon Knowledge. These lead to a high level of Resolve, which we need so that we can hold our weapons. Put a decent amount in Vigor so that the build does not die easily. Let's take a look at the items. It all started with the Shield Moon Disc. The build is basically built around that item. All of the stats are very helpful here, but the unique stat is what really makes this item strong. 20% increased cooldown rate for Frost Nova is very good. I use Silence here just for the cooldown rate bonus. A better weapon would be a spear with a high percentage increase to cold damage and also a cooldown rate. My swap weapon is also interesting. I use this melee club only for bosses. The club gives a big bonus on cold damage, ailment power and damage over time. I also attack bosses with my melee just to squeeze in some more damage. For that alone I use the 1 point in primary attack to convert the damage into cold damage. I prioritized items with cooldown rate. The helmet gives 15% and I need energy regen on there. Cooldown rate rolls on rings too. You also need rings that have ailment power, damage over time and spell damage. The amulet also needs cooldown rate and ailment power. Shoulders need ailment power and crit chance is a nice to have stat. Use some good chest armor with health regen and resistances. Boots need, as always, off journeying, off phasing and also a centaur hoof. We have all these cooldown rate bonuses on our gear, so how does that affect our actual cooldown time? We got a total of 81% increased cooldown rate on our items. Frost Nova, with all items equipped, has a cooldown of 3.1 seconds. By unequipping the items, we don't have the cooldown rate bonuses and the cooldown is doubled. We are coming to the strategy section where I give recommendations on how to play and level the build. When starting the build at an early level, skill Storm Mastery first in order to get tier 4 as soon as possible. You want to unlock Freeze with the Deep Freeze passive. You can start with Ice Shards and later switch over to Frost Nova. At the beginning, you won't have enough ailment bonuses and you haven't unlocked Freeze yet, so I recommend that you skill the Flash Freeze modifier. This one guarantees to freeze the enemies, later you don't need that anymore. You will start with Tempest instead of Vanish, because you unlock Storm first. The Rogue passives come later. Since the priority is on Storm Mastery, Rogue is just a support. I recommend you don't overcap your monster level with this build, because it just takes too long to kill bosses. What you can do is turning the level down before a boss fight, so that you can kill the boss faster. I don't recommend this build if your intention is dealing as much damage as possible. Sure, we deal with mobs easily, but bosses take longer. The build is a very strong casual build, and you don't need much farming for items. You can just use some other shield or staff. It doesn't matter too much which weapon to use. You just need to spam cooldown rate items and then you are set. Let's talk about how to play. That is quite easy here. Teleport into the midst of mobs, use Cyclone to freeze everything. Then cast Frostbite and Frost Nova to cause cold explosions everywhere. Teleport around to avoid enemy attacks when they manage to actually go for an attack. Bosses are a whole different story. You slow them down a lot, but you also need to dodge their attacks. This build almost never runs out of dodges, so you can evade big attacks from bosses. They take forever though, so that is a big downside of this build. Most YouTube build guide videos of Titan Quest 2 showcase the builds that deal the most damage. This one here is an exception. It is more of a good support build, perfect in combination with some crit build, like the rogue trickshot build that struggles with huge crowds of monsters but that can deal with bosses easily. Have you tried an Ice Mage in Titan Quest 2 yet, and what is your take on the freezer build? Let me know your opinion in the comments. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.